Hello, and welcome to this snapshot workshop for parents on digital citizenship and how to help you manage your child's digital world. I'm Kimberly Palmiato. I'm an educational psychologist that's worked with kids from preschool all the way through high school and their families for over 20 years. I am currently in both public school and private practice setting. And I also have 4 girls of my own at home, which are very active digital natives. So we went through introducing digital citizenship along with everyone else. And so I wanted to be able to create this small little workshop to introduce how we used digital citizenship with our kids and what worked, and some tips and tricks for helping you do it in your family. Okay, so I created this to highlight some important topics and tools that parents should be aware of before launching into the digital world with their kids. There are 4 areas that we're going to review. First will be just the basic elements of digital citizenship so that you know what a good program should include. Excuse me. We'll also review how technology impacts your brain and learning, along with the positive and negative ways technology impacts learning and emotional skills. Lastly, I'll share a few links and ideas for how to introduce technology, social media, and phones into your child's life. So let's start with the 5 elements of digital citizenship. The first is digital etiquette. Basically, it's when to use technology appropriately and positively. It's also called netiquette, which basically means the use of good manners in online communication, such as emails, forums, blogs, and social networking sites. As adults, we've learned how to translate in-person etiquette to the digital world, but our kids are really still learning these lessons. And so a great book to kind of reference and use is this Digital Etiquette by Victoria Turk. She gives some good vocabulary, things that I actually hadn't learned, as well as some basic etiquette tools for the digital online world. And then you'll also find you'll also find some videos here, and all of this information I'm happy to send to you in an email with all of the links and downloads if you can't find it on my website. Just send me an email and let me know. So one part about social or digital etiquette is the social networking. And I think that we've been trained as parents to think social networking is very bad. It actually is not the devil. When we use it appropriately, it can be a really great tool. Despite all the negativity around it, it's a tool to help us keep in touch with others. And quite frankly, it's become a staple of communication for all of us. We use it to share day-to-day activities, maintain friendships with people, both near and far, post photos to share with others, and coordinate social events. So when it's used correctly, we really can use it well. Cyberbullying and the impact social media has on anxiety and self-esteem with our kids is real, but it can be harnessed if we use it as a tool and teach our kids about how to use it effectively. So some things to consider when you're letting your children use social networking or social media is to be aware of the things that they post and reinforce with them that others can use filters and tools to manipulate information. Helping them understand that what they see is not always the real deal is really, really important in helping them manage their perception of what others are posting online. Take a moment weekly to check in how much time your child has spent on social media versus how much time they've spent in real time with friends and family. There really should be an equal balance between these two things. I can tell you, I notice a huge difference in mood with my kids when they're spending too much time online, and we have to give them a nature jolt to kind of get them back in the balanced place they need to be. Too much time online can create anxiety and moodiness. So today, all of the angst and drama-filled stuff that teenagers go through, that all tends to play out online via social media. We do know that research from the adolescent brain is not fully developed until their mid-20s. And so a lot of the times they have trouble thinking about some of these long-term implications of their choices. And it's something that we're going to have to help facilitate. So one way to do this is to help them use reflection questions when they're thinking about posting things online. The two questions that are very valuable is, number one, what is the value of posting this? And number two, how will others perceive or receive the information I'm about to post? When you use these two, whether you have them posted up for them to reference or you just teach them to ask themselves this every time, it's going to be very helpful when we're talking about digital etiquette. Okay, digital security. This is really how to be safe online through the use of passwords, as well as understanding that there are things like scams, theft, phishing scams that are out there. Password managers are great. If your child has a lot of social media accounts, this is one way to store the passwords in an encrypted vault, and they just have to remember one password for all of their accounts. It can also set up a two-factor authentication for added security. And if you don't have one built into your computer, this website here gives you some good tips on how to navigate to find a good password manager. Teaching kids how to keep their information personal. Your personal information is just that, personal. Things like address, phone number, email, financial information, and photos that can reveal things about you. This is probably, that last one is probably the one that is the most underrated by kids. They will take pictures and not really understand that maybe the name of their school is behind them, or there's a popular, I don't know, place that they're taking the picture that everyone would know where they are. Whatever it may be, these things become permanently available for others to see online. So it's important for them to just kind of take notice of when you're taking a picture and you're posting it online, look at the picture before you post it and make sure that there's nothing that can give away your personal information. That being said, the next piece is making sure that they understand they only click on sites that they know are safe. It's easy to fall down a rabbit hole when you're researching or just web surfing. And many times kids don't really realize that they could be clicking on sites that may not only give them a virus, but may do other things like expose their information to others. So one site that is really great is this psafe.com. So if you don't know if a site is safe, you can copy it and paste it onto this website and it will give you information about the website. Next, make sure the highest privacy settings are available. Again, here's a site for you to do that if you don't know how to do that. And then teaching kids to accept friend requests from only people that they know. This is probably one of the hardest things to get our kids to do, because innately they want to have popularity online just like they want to have popularity in real life. So the number of likes and followers that they have tends to be very motivational for them. So it's very important to help them understand that they need to be choosy, and they want to be choosy as online, just as they are in their real world friendship groups. And that helps them understand that not everyone online is a friend. Even friends of friends can be people that may not have the best of intentions. So just be picky and choosy in the people that you involve in your friend group online as well as in person. Digital law. Digital law is really helping kids understand how to use and share this digital content legally, and also how to cite information when they're using it online and creating things, or creating just like they would in writing a paper. Digital Citizenship for Kids describes this really well. They talk about identity theft of stealing people's information is really the same thing as stealing someone's property in real life. So things like videos, movies, pictures, music, all of these things are basically stealing when you just take them, both they're illegal. There's some wonderful digital curriculums, and every digital curriculum has some piece of digital law in it. There's a couple videos here that you can also reference, but when you're looking at a digital curriculum to use prior to letting your kids go online, just make sure it has digital law infused in it. Digital literacy is basically, how do you know that what you're finding online is legitimate? This is something that a lot of kids don't ask themselves, and quite frankly, I think a lot of us adults are guilty of this too, where something will pop up in a news feed and you'll just repost it without really doing the research to consider whether it's accurate or not. So we want our kids to just start asking the questions of themselves about how do you know, how can you confirm that this information is correct and accurate? You want to consider the source. You want to ask, does this person that's posting have an agenda? Is there a way to confirm it from other sources? You want them to just start thinking critically about this. Excuse me. Accurate information is a way to be a reliable source for others, and in turn, this really demonstrates good character and judgment. So we can be models for this, to teach kids how to learn this skill, and they can start with a simple website like Snopes that can help them confirm the information that they are getting ready to post. Digital health has two prongs to it, the physical and the emotional. So the physical is just that, things that impact your physical body. Blue light, which can impact melatonin and sleep, fatigue from maybe being online too long. And the fatigue also is kind of that tense muscles or having your body out of alignment. All of those things also from hunching over the computer screen or the phone. Attention and concentration is a big one, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then long term, it could be things like visual concerns if you're not really paying attention to taking breaks and giving your eyes a break from the screens. Emotional health online really is linked for kids specifically with tweens and teens with anxiety and depression. There has been quite a bit of research to support that there's an increase in anxiety and depression for kids that are spending excessive time on social media and technology. It can also impact some friendship issues if they're not having that balance that we talked about before. And then self-esteem and confidence is something that's easily manipulated in the online world. Someone's self-image is influenced by a lot of different things, including images seen and the interactions they have in the digital world. Comments or likes on photos shared via social media, email conversations, texting, other digital interactions can have positive and negative ways in which we shape how we see ourselves. It's important to remind our kids that what you see online is not always true. People present a picture of what they want you to see. And having them do just a little bit of research on this online, on that particular topic of how people present what they want you to see instead of what is really true, can be very eye-opening, especially for some of our girls. Teaching our kids to remind themselves of this when they start comparing themselves to friends or other people online is really crucial in their emotional development with self-esteem and self-image. We want to limit their exposure to social media and make them really aware of this innate need for likes on their comments and posts. And lastly, one thing I can tell you that has helped for us is to limit selfies. I think as kids move into that tween and teen stage, selfies become something that is an exploratory way of finding out who they are. But our rule in our home is that you're not allowed to post selfies unless there's a specific story attached to it and we have a discussion beforehand. The reason behind this is because then it becomes less about posting for likes and comments and more about posting for a reason or a story. It also forces our kids to think about what they're posting and why they're posting it. And it engages them with friends in person or other activities in person in real life before they post. So it has a number of different really positive implications. The last piece of the puzzle that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about because the digital curriculum includes pieces about the digital footprint. But I do think that it's important for kids to understand that their digital markers are public and permanent. And what they do online leaves a trail behind them that not only impacts their present, but really impacts their future. These are the things that they do online are things that will forever be there. And that's very different than the way a lot of us grew up that are digital immigrants. So it's important for us as parents to be able to try to delay and slow down that digital footprint as much as possible, because once they have the reins, they are responsible for what they put out there and they cannot take it back. So one activity that we've done that was actually very eye-opening was to just do a simple Google search with our names. We had Our daughters do that as well as us. And we kind of looked to see what was out there. And we didn't really think we'd find a whole lot with our kids because they're not that old. But it was very surprising and eye-opening to see that there was information out there about them. And I think it really helped her to see that even when she wasn't actively engaged in the online presence, online world, there was still information out there about her. So imagine what happens when you do become very engaged. So those are the basic elements that should be included in a digital curriculum. And I'll have some references for you at the end about digital curriculums that you can explore in order to use. But next, I really wanted to just touch on technology in the brain and the impact that it has, as well as maybe some statistics that you weren't aware of. So physical and psychological elements can really get intertwined as we introduce technology to our kids. Some of the areas that have research to support this include, support the impact include areas like language, attention, memory, and emotional skills. Social media and video games, whether it's the console or the phone, are developed with the primary objective to keep you engaged. Algorithms are developed to trigger dopamine production in order to give you that feeling of happiness at just the right rate to keep you coming back for more. This addictive technology is interfering with the way dopamine is being used in our brains. Children aren't using dopamine correctly. They seek happiness in these unsocial methods like technology to get that natural high, whereas normally and traditionally we would be doing this through face-to-face interactions. Sleep is also a huge issue that impacts kids that are allowed to use technology before bed. Blue light interrupts melatonin production. Sleep cycles are affected by bright light from screens, and this tricks our brain into thinking it's still daylight, which causes sleep difficulties and sleep interruptions. And there's been a plethora of information to support the fact that we need consistent, good, deep REM sleep in order to integrate the information that we've learned in that day, but also to regulate our body and our emotions. So it's very important to not have those screens by your bed. In terms of attention, technology conditions the brain to pay attention to information very differently than reading. So a metaphor that I've heard used before is the difference between scuba diving and jet skiing. So book reading is like scuba diving, where a diver is really submerged in a quiet, visually restricted, slow-paced setting. There are not a lot of distractions, and as a result, they're able to focus narrowly, think deeply, think critically, because all that information is limited around them to allow them to do that. In contrast, the internet is like jet skiing. A jet skier is skimming very fast along the surface. They're exposed to a very broad scope of information, and there's a lot of distractions around them while they're doing it. They can go from one thing to the next thing very quickly because they're going so fast. So this is something to keep in mind when we're thinking about reading. If you're reading a book, it's very different than reading maybe like an article or seeing a video online. All of these things lead to emotional skill development, which includes things like being able to stop, wait, and problem solve before you react, manage your emotions, and then regulating your emotions in response. So some of the statistics that are out there for kids and technology is quite alarming, to be quite honest. 95% of teens either have or have access to a smartphone. 95%. 45 teens say they use internet almost constantly. Another 45% say they go online several times a day, meaning roughly 9 in 10 teens go online at least multiple times per day. When it comes to which one of the online platforms teens use most, about a third say that it's Snapchat and YouTube, and 15% say Instagram. Only 10% use Facebook, which I think most of us know as parents because Facebook isn't cool for teens, but it's just important that the information on the research still supports that. So overall, 84% of teens say they have or have access to a game console at home, and 90% say they play video games of any kind, which could be on a phone or the game console. A substantial majority of girls report having access to a game console at home, which is like 75%, or playing games in general. But it's even higher among boys. Okay, so nearly half of the teens that were researched say that they posted something online that they later regretted, which is really why I say it's important for us to do this digital citizenship training for them prior to them getting online. 71% of teens use more than one social networking site. 89% of teens use social media. So the other thing that I think is really interesting, and it's not meant to scare you, I just think it's interesting to note, is that there are some research that middle schoolers' risk for depression jumps 27% when they use social media. Kids who use their phones for at least 3 hours a day are much more likely to have suicidal thoughts. And this is just more of a reason to limit time on social media and balance it with real life social scenarios. Our middle school kids are ill prepared to take on a lot of the challenges that come with social media independently. It is crucial for us to be monitoring that closely if you decide to move into the social media realm with your kids. So what are the effects of tech and on learning and behavior? So here we're going to talk just a little bit about how technology has the impact on learning and behavior, not just the brain. Now, there are positives and negatives. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in the negatives of technology, but there are some positives as well. It enhances learning and their independence. There are things like smart boards, document cameras, Apple TV, 3D printers. These are all things that are included in a lot of educational lessons. And during the time this is being recorded, we are in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic, which means all of our kids are now learning digitally. We're in a world of e-learning that a lot of us are still becoming comfortable with. And our kids are actually really comfortable with it, but because we have not been digital natives, the teachers and other people that are immigrants are having to adapt to this style, which makes it a little bit more difficult for our kids. So using technology with learning really flexes their cognitive muscles of decision making and problem solving and time management if we do it right. It can foster problem-solving skills. There are certain video games where kids have to work independently to achieve a specific goal. There are others that they have to work with others, so they're problem-solving and collaborating with others. So in these types of games, they're posed with different types of roadblocks and challenges that they have to navigate and overcome, sometimes together. So in theory, this should be able to help them overcome their own problem-solving solutions in real life situations, like with homework or disagreements with friends or resiliency with personal hardship. But sometimes it isn't such a natural transition. They need a little help from us to help them link what they're doing online and how they're problem solving online in these games to what's happening in real life. So this connection is often just the push they need to generalize that skill. It develops future technological leaders. This is kind of just something that I think we know and we've seen. There are a lot of really great benefits to our digital native kids that are born using technology as they grow into the next generation of digital job opportunities. And it does encourage creativity. There are so many things online and through the iPad and through the computer that encourage our kids to use imagination and creativity. We just have to monitor that closely. In terms of the negatives, some of these are a little bit overlapping in a way. It can impact social skills and emotional development if we're not really monitoring how our kids are using technology socially. The virtual social connection is the preferred way to communicate by many kids. They are more likely to text or chat on social media or connect through online gaming than actually meet their friends in person. While this is really a great tool to continue interaction, it is not a substitute for in-person communication and socialization. The skills that are included in these in-person included in these in-person connections are developed and honed through daily interaction, and they include things like understanding turn taking during conversation and using and reading facial expressions, understanding how you change how you react and speak based on what the other person is saying and doing, reading those nonverbal cues and making appropriate eye contact. A lot of these interactions can be misinterpreted online because you're missing the tone and the nonverbal skills. There was a famous study that noted that 93% of our communication is done through nonverbal. That's 55% is body language and 38% is your tone of voice. So just think about that for a minute and imagine how much is missing when you take those two things away. In terms of possible health issues, this really is something that I think a lot of parents monitor quite closely. You know, the Wii came out and really encouraged kids to get active with their video gaming, and a lot of attention is paid to the weight issue, and less physical activity can lead to possible weight gain. But there also have been other things that people haven't considered, like when you're out in nature and you're exploring and you're running and playing, you're developing things like bilateral coordination and balance and practicing your fine and gross motor skills. Those are all overflow skills into learning. So these are things that we need to consider when we're looking at the health issues with kids that are online too much. We talked a little bit about the sleep quality and the impact it has on sleep quality. A study from the the Journal American Medical Association Pediatrics found that children and adolescents who use media before bed were 2 times more likely to not get enough sleep at night. This is something that I hear consistently with kids that I work with, is that they are allowed to have their phones or their iPads or whatever it may be, tablets, by their bed at night. It really does interfere with sleep. If one recommendation from the research is that kids do not have any screen time 2 hours before bed. That gives their body an opportunity to really reset, calm down, regulate, and get ready for sleep. Children under the age of 13 typically require 11 to 14 hours of sleep, just depending on their age. It is immensely important for children to promote growth, healthy heart rates, weight, increases their attention span, which ultimately all boosts their learning ability. So when we're talking about technology and screens, my one biggest recommendation is to not allow your children to have these tools and devices by their bed in their room when they sleep. And then lastly, it can reduce the mastery of self-regulation and self-soothing skills. You know, every child has tantrums or emotional outbursts at one point or another. The challenge in today's world is that many times we mistake the fact that a smartphone or a tablet stopping this behavior in the immediate is a solution, without realizing that it really is only a Band-Aid in that moment. When we hand a child a cell phone or a tablet to help them calm down in the moment, the distraction can really negatively impact their opportunity to learn how to self-soothe and regulate those moments. I think this is hard, right? Because it does take time to sit down and walk your child through an emotional meltdown. It also triggers a lot of things with us as adults. So it's really important for you as a parent to know what your triggers are, explore some of those triggers, and that will help you ultimately teach your child how to self-regulate in those moments. One really great book that I actually don't have on this slide is The Whole Brain Child by Dan Siegel. If you have not read that, it's a wonderful way to be able to explore just this topic. So we talked previously about how technology may impact the brain, and this really is related to brain-based behaviors that are linked to technology. Delayed gratification is a skill that serves in many capacities in life. Without this ability, you start to feel anxious or easily upset because you can't have what you want right away. In children, this can take the form of tantrums, agitation, talking back, anger, or even anxiety. The younger the child, the more externalized that behavior is going to be. So that's the behavior you can see because they haven't mastered the skill of delayed gratification. Technology actually teaches us the opposite. Technology is immediate gratification for anything you want to know. You can order and receive things the same day. You can contact someone with a response in seconds. Gone are the days of waiting by the phone for a call or checking the mailbox 3 times a day for the letter that you've been waiting for from somebody. This really not only impacts our ability to sustain attention, but it also really impacts our memory. There's not as much of a need for fact knowledge since it's really all at our fingertips. Research has validated this with millennials being more forgetful than older generations. Internet search engines lead to less of an ability to remember things and stronger skills with remembering where to find things. Not having to retain information in your brain allows it to engage in some of these more higher order processing things like contemplation and critical thinking and problem solving, as long as we're encouraging those skills. So limiting technology and creating opportunities to practice waiting for what you want is a skill that we as parents really have the obligation to introduce to our kids that helps them in turn to manage their responses and their reactions in words and as well as in their behavior. And then language is a critical part of social interaction and social behavior. Critical thinking can be developed through conversation expansion, which is when you help your child learn to build on conversations by referencing past experiences or things they've read. When you only read or share blocks of information in short chunks, like the 140 characters or less that we tend to see online, it encourages critical thinking and conversation. It also doesn't really allow you to think on your feet, be quick in your reaction because you have time to think about and edit your response. So in conversation, you have to be able to respond to someone within a fairly quick response time, whereas online, you can sit back and wait and respond when you're ready. So the last portion of this is really just talking about some recommendations on, when you're ready to start introducing this, how do you do that? Where do you go? What do you do? When we're talking about introducing and managing technology, you want to start first by watching a video series together and discussing, right? We want to be prepared when we are introducing this to our kids. Creating a family plan is something that is really, really helpful. I have a download of a contract that we use online. There are also many ones all over the internet that you can find. But by creating a family plan and a contract, what you're doing is encouraging some boundaries at home for your kids so that they know how to use the technology, what's expected, and what the consequences will be if they break it. This is an example of the technology contract. The next thing is you're going to want to confirm security settings on all the devices that your kids are using. This is something not just initially you want to do, but you're definitely going to want to follow up with a regular kind of tune-up on all of this stuff as you move along. So those tech checkups you should do at least once a week in order to make sure that everything is going easy and fluidly and there's no surprises that you'll find. We talked about doing a Google search on yourself and your child, but you can also set up Google Alerts. So you can put names into the Google Alert, and if anyone is, if their name is coming up online through Google searches, then it will alert you so that you can see if there's any changes in your digital footprint. Check the history use of your child with website visits and any downloaded apps. You can definitely do this through the security systems on an Apple, at least for sure, where you get notifications and the kids have to ask for permission before they download any apps onto their devices. And then you really want to check your own usage. We're models for them. So if we're on our phones all the time and telling them not to be, then that's really sending them a hypocritical message. So putting ourselves in check is really important sometimes. Reviewing social media posts and text chains is laborious, I will not lie, but it definitely is something that is crucial in making sure that we're helping our kids manage the social implications of posts and texts that they have with their friends. There have been many times when we've gone through a chain of text and we've had to sit down and talk about and problem solve maybe why some of the things that they said or their friends said were not helpful, not appropriate, not positive, and could even be hurtful. So let's talk a little bit about introducing social media. This is a big decision. And when you are thinking about introducing social media to your kids, you first want to make sure that they've gone through the digital citizenship lessons and curriculum. You want them to understand what it means to have an online presence, what it means to have a digital footprint, and know that they know how to manage that. You know, there's a lot of people that talk about ages or grades of when they're going to give their child a phone, a smartphone, social media. My experience, and the research supports it, is that you really need to focus more on the level of responsibility that your child is at their stage of responsibility than their age or grade. There are some kids, and we have variation within our house of our kids that are more responsible than others at different ages. It may be that, you know, your child needs to be a little bit older in order to have grasped that level of responsibility that's needed for the freedom of social media and technology online. So if you do need to get your child a phone for safety reasons, or you want to be able to get in touch with them, I would very much encourage you to not start with a smartphone, to start with a phone that has limited online capabilities and limited app capabilities until you know that they're ready. Start with one thing or one account and then add it slowly. This kind of goes back to that level of responsibility. When you start with one and your child shows you that they can be responsible and they're handling that appropriately, then you can add another one. But don't just make it a free-for-all all at once and allow them to just get everything that they want. Also have discussions about what apps they want, what social media accounts they want, and why, and the pros and cons of that. Allowing them to do a little bit of that research on the pros and the cons will not only help you make the decision, but it will help them understand why that decision was made. Monitor and talk about posts, emails, and texts with others. This kind of was said before, but I'm gonna say it again because it is so crucial. Make sure you're doing weekly, if not daily, checks on how conversations are going online, and have those conversations with your child. And then lastly, do not be afraid to step in. I don't care what's happening online with my child. If it is getting out of hand, I will be stepping in. I will be making decisions on whether or not she's going to continue with those conversations. It's really important for your kids to know that the boundaries are there. And it's also important to know for their friends to know that there are boundaries in their home. So don't be afraid to step in when you need to. Okay, so this is my resource page. Again, I'm happy to send this to anyone if you can't find it on my website, but this is just some books that I found and some online lessons and curriculum that I found to be very helpful. I know there's a lot more out there, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with everything. So these links are wonderful resources, and just let me know by email if you would like to have these through an email format instead. So that's it. I really developed this as a starting point for you as a parent. And this is my information. You can email me anytime with any questions that you have. I try to keep my website updated as much as possible to reflect all of the new information that's coming through. And if you're ever interested in doing any more training or just consulting about digital life with your child, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. The last page is really some references. Again, if you're interested in having these, just let me know. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time today to spend on digital citizenship with me, and I hope to see you soon.